So my story was when I was 15. I met a boy that worshiped the absolute ground that I walked on. I had never met a boy that had treated me like royalty. I had never met somebody that liked me as much as he did. It was almost overwhelming.
When I look back at my high school experience, the thing that stands out to me most is having my mom die when I was in high school. She died when I was 14. She had cancer when I was in middle school.
When I was in high school, I started going to high school in Iowa. And everything in Iowa is kind of predicated on education. So I did a lot of stuff in school and not a lot of investigating things outside my life. And Iowa is sort of a place where almost everybody is white. We had one black family that was sort of our token people of color, but the rest of us were just these white farmers. My sophomore year, my parents decided to move to a place a little bit farther away from where you would think. So I ended up in Hawaii my junior year of high school.
Today I'm going to tell you a story about a hardship in my life, or a hard time that I had when I was 13 years old in the 7th grade. The first part of the story is I got in a fight with a girl in 7th grade and I got kicked out of school, and that could be a whole separate story.
When I was in high school, starting my junior year, my sister was diagnosed with a very, very rare form of cancer. It required surgeries, of which I started taking care of her while she was actually still in intensive care.
And when I went to high school at Tamales High School in Westmoreland County, and actually high school was probably one of my most challenging periods of my life, because I grew up pretty oblivious to my cerebral palsy, and I think in high school it became more and more apparent how different I was.
So we were dating for a while, and my parents didn't like him, and I didn't really understand why. It was the first time anybody had ever shown me that much love. Why would they not like him?
My mom first had cancer when I was in 7th grade, and I remember it was breast cancer, so I remember her telling me, I found a lump in my breast, but I'm going to the doctor, it should be fine.
So the transition was a little rocky because, like most kids, you're kind of established as a sophomore. You kind of actually think you know what's going on. So I was supplanted to basically a different planet, because Hawaii is just not a different state. There's so much more going on there.
So I was expelled in the 7th grade around maybe November or something, and I had to spend the rest of my 7th grade year at continuation schools.
School became not an option for me at that period of time, at least regular school, going like normal people do. So I would go in long enough, touch base with my teachers to get whatever assignments were out for that week, and I'd go home and I'd do the homework either at the hospital or the waiting room or whenever I could fit it in.
And when I first started liking girls, I felt like I wasn't supposed to, and just trying to fit into this high school when it was a class, but it was a pretty different than how I grew up.
So I chose my boyfriend, and at 16 years old I moved out. I was a junior in high school.
And then in 8th grade, when I was in 8th grade, she got it again. But this time it was like all over her body, so it was like in her breasts, but also like her lungs, I believe, and other parts of her body.
So if you don't know anything about Hawaii, it's one of those places where every culture exists. So I was educated really quickly that there's so many more nationalities than I knew even existed, and each nationality had its own thing to consider.
The first one was in Santa Rosa on Airway Drive. And the hard part about going to that school was I was the only white person. So there were boys and girls. There's about 20 to 25 students at that school. And since I was the only white one, I don't know if that was the reason, but I got picked on a lot.
It was really challenging to try to stay up and try to graduate. I lost complete connection with the kids I was going to school with. It was a very isolating experience.
I've been thinking about kind of a humiliating experience is when at the high school graduation, they had a slideshow, and I remember that there was a photo of another kid threw me in the garbage can.
And being 16 and living in your own apartment sounds really cool, but what it boiled down to was my father was only legally responsible to make sure I had a place to live. So he paid my rent, and that was it.
That was in 8th grade, and so I remember her telling me that, that she was going to die, but that, it might be in a couple years, like we don't really know, so just, let's just try to live life to the fullest until I do pass. So
it sort of was, I kind of stopped talking to anybody because I didn't have any friends. I was in a new place, and I sort of became this introvert. The only real expressive part of me was I happened to be an artist, so I had my little group of other weird little freaky artists, and I was an athlete, so I had my basketball team, so I sort of existed in those two worlds.
And for the first time I got to experience a little bit what it's like to be a minority, which is something I'm not used to. So I got picked on and beat up. There was a lot of verbal threats that I was gonna get my butt kicked. Somebody pulled a knife on me once, but there was no physical violence, but I still felt very unsafe at school every day and uncomfortable.
At the same time, there was a lot of stress on my family. My dad was working 2 jobs. My mom was at home, but not able to really care for my sister very much.
And I kind of had in high school that I was going to make sure I wouldn't let what others say to me or do to me define me.
I worked at McDonald's, and I was making probably $6.25 an hour while going to school. So what that meant was that most weeks I would buy a bag of potatoes, and that's what I lived on.
That day, September 14th, she passed away. I remember being in the room with her. And yeah, at that moment, I had to realize that I was basically, without anybody, or without my mom.
I sort of had to reinvent myself, which is kind of cool because I got to start over, and I didn't worry about being popular or who liked me or whatever. I could kind of start over and create my own friend group with people that I actually cared about and cared what they thought about, and politically and intellectually, I sort of formed a new group of friends instead of the ones that I'd been going to school with my whole life.
I kind of got shoved into the middle of the circle, sort of forced in the middle, and then everybody started throwing rocks at me, which was traumatic.
Walking down the hallways in the days that I was there when students were there and just feeling like nobody else could really understand what I was going through. I look back now and talking to friends and talking to other people, knowing that everybody has their own life story, everybody's got their own challenges, and now I know that I wasn't alone. There was other people that were feeling as isolated as I was, and as frightened and as disconnected from everything.
My parents then taught me that I had to learn how to stand up for myself, and so I kind of left high school with kind of a chip on my shoulder.
So throughout my junior year of high school, I was taking the lightest load of classes I could possibly take without doing damage to my GPA. I was working really hard.
So that was just really a huge turning point for me. It was just knowing that, my mom, who's my best friend, wasn't going to be in my life anymore.
So I refused to go back to that school, and then my mom got me transferred to a different continuation school in Windsor, actually. And I don't think this school is still there, but it was literally a trailer in a parking lot of school buses. So I don't know if this school exists, but it was a trailer with 12 kids in it.
It worked out that my sister died in April. I graduated in June, barely. I turned 18 in August, and I moved out September 1st. because my situation at home had devolved to the point where it was no longer safe for me to be there.
I always had the belief in myself that I could, with my effort and my attitude, I could amount to something, so.
And what my parents had figured out that I hadn't figured out yet because I wasn't old enough to see the signs, my boyfriend was emotionally manipulative, and it was getting worse and worse.
Yeah, so high school, especially going from having my mom to not having my mom, and then going to a whole new high school because it was only September of that new year of in 9th grade going into high school. So that was really tough.
In that way, it was a great growing experience. I learned so much about how different people are culturally, racially, and I sort of, in starting over, I think I'm a better person because most people don't get to start over their junior year. You're kind of already stuck in your little rut, in your little niche on campus.
And the problem here was that I was the only girl. So it was about 12 kids, and I was the only girl with a bunch of boys, some of them big, some of them smaller, but a lot of them bigger than me and pretty intimidating.
We moved to LA, and it was really the music, a combination of being around music all the time and being with people that really loved me and really supported me. They were a good bunch of people to be with because we insulated each other and we protected each other and we supported each other.
I have one thing you can always guarantee is that there will be some hard times. And it's not whether you fall down, because everyone's going to fall down at one point or another. It's about how well you can get up and, just have that belief that you're good,
And that was the moment it hit me, that I was in a really unsafe situation. And I had alienated everybody in my family. So I contacted my family and I said, I'm in trouble. I'm unsafe, literally in a dangerous situation. I need your help.
So I had to really push myself to get through school and to try to find really good friends who could be supportive and care about me, because I felt like I didn't have it anymore without having my mom.
I kind of hated my parents for doing it because I left my universe. I was just jerked out of this place that I'd grown up in, and I had no roots and I had no familiar place.
So I was in another situation where I never felt safe at school. And pretty much every day I was sexually harassed, either verbally or physically. When I was in class, in front of the teacher, the verbal harassment would happen. The boys would talk about like how my boobs looked in my outfit and like, oh, look at her butt, and stuff like that. And it totally made me uncomfortable. But I was so young, I didn't really know how to defend myself. I would sort of just sit there uncomfortably.
So I look back and I think, what I want people to know, I'm old, I have gray hair, I've got 2 kids, and I've had a really wonderful life, and I'm still married to the man that I moved out with.
You take care of the things that you can control with your attitude and your effort, and you work hard, I was able to go to UC Santa Cruz, join the tennis team there, made some great friends at UC Santa Cruz, and had a tremendous experience.
And at being 16 and not wanting to follow my parents' rules, to just date whatever boy I wanted to date. And 1 year later, coming home and feeling like I'd come back from college. My parents trusted my judgment. They respected my space. I had earned the right to be treated as an adult.
My dad also was not in the picture, so I didn't have a relationship with my dad, so I kind of felt like I was parentless.
The worst harassment was outside during break, when the teacher wouldn't see us. At that time, boys would physically grab at me, kind of corner me into corners and try to kind of like make out with me and stuff. And it was really gross. It was traumatic and terrifying.
So I look back and I think what I really want to come away with is that not only can you survive that, but the things that I went through back then helped me make me really strong.
I think that for me it's always been about just having that belief and kind of just trusting that things will turn around and not letting others dictate what you will be, because then you're becoming a victim.
And I remember telling my parents that I was so grateful that they had a washing machine, that I didn't have to take a bag of clothes to the laundromat. I washed my own clothes. I remember telling my friends in high school, my senior year by this time, "You don't understand. You have a washing machine and dryer at your house. You should be grateful."
You know, teens these days and like doing what they have to deal with, I just think of like how hard it must be to have parents who really don't care about you, or you feel like they don't, and you feel like you're on your own. And so that's why I have becoming a therapist, because I know that other kids feel like if they don't have anybody who cares about them or who doesn't love them, or they feel like lost and alone. And so I feel like I want to be that person that shows them that I do care and that they're not alone and they have help.
But in the end, when I'm a little bit older than 17 or 18, I look back and realize it was a great opportunity for me, even though at the time it felt like I'd just been punched in the stomach.
To emphasize the growth that I've gotten out of that tough experience was, it did end. In the 8th grade, I got to go back into public school, and I got to go to Slater Middle School in Santa Rosa, and it was like heaven to be back in a normal school where there are teachers everywhere and campus supervisors all over the place. I never felt unsafe, and that was such a huge deal to me.
They helped define who I am now, and I feel really quite unbreakable at this point of time because I feel honed. I feel like I've seen the worst of it. I made it through. Survival by fire, I suppose, trial by fire.
I really resorted to some pretty honest poetry that I started to write, and I did some open mics, sharing with some of my frustrations and my heartbreaks, and through the poetry I kind of took my power back and I started to name what I was feeling.
And not having enough to eat, not having any money to go anywhere, living on my own, and being in an emotionally and verbally abusive situation snapped me out of being a child and helped me see what the world was like outside. And it drastically changed who I was as a person. Instead of being willing to let anything happen to me, I came out of that like a fighter. And I wouldn't have changed any of it.
Not having parents is really hard, and I feel like I wanted to do something meaningful with my life that felt like life was worth living, because when something bad happens to you, you feel like my life is over, like it isn't ever going to get better. And so I had to find that meaning for myself. If I can survive that as a 14-year-old, then I feel like I can survive anything.
It was overall a positive experience to be a minority, very briefly, just so I have a slight bit of insight into what it's like to be the only one with a certain skin color or the only one of a certain gender. That was a very eye-opening experience, and it helps me really appreciate everything in my life now. I've been able to feel really grateful for tiny little things that you may not have otherwise thought about, like being safe, being in a friendly environment. Feeling physically safe is a big deal, and not many people have it. So please count your blessings on all your fingers and all your toes.
I think it's like most things. It may look difficult at the time you're in that situation, but if you're able to look forward a little bit, which is really hard for someone in their teenage years because everything happens in the now, But most things that happen for a reason, and in any situation you can find something that's going to actually make you better in the end.
So I just want people to know too that your families and your messed up families don't have to define who you will be. It's not who you have to be, and you don't have to repeat the mistakes that your parents made.
Exercise and do poetry, meditation, and cultivating good friends. I've been able to develop a pretty good life for myself, where I have a job that I love the kids that I teach, so for me to keep with some determination and just keep believing in myself, no matter what others might think or say about me, was pretty important in my process.